US national debt exceeds $33 trillion, while the US national wealth surged by hundreds of trillions more. A more nuanced perspective emerges when juxtaposing debt with wealth. Actually, no, forget that. The US national debt exceeds $33 trillion, while the US national wealth surged by hundreds of trillions of dollars, or hundreds of trillions more, I might say. I'm Ronaldo McKenzie, and welcome to another episode of the NeoLiberal Round podcast. And that's what we're going to be discussing today. The title of today's episode is The Complex Interplay of National Debt and Wealth in the United States, a comprehensive analysis. Again, the complex interplay of national debt and wealth in the United States, a comprehensive analysis. That is, in fact, the title of an editorial article that I am writing, just about to publish in the NeoLiberal Post and the NeoLiberal Journals at the NeoLiberal Corporation. The editorial promises to be quite impactful, powerful, insightful. It will provide you some additional considerations that the New York Times never thought to consider in their analysis. I'm talking with, of course, with my co-producer here, Dante Nelson, who is in the background. Welcome to another episode of the NeoLiberal Round podcast. And again, U.S. national debt exceeds $33 trillion, while the national wealth surged by hundreds of trillions. A more nuanced perspective emerges when juxtaposing debt with wealth. Now here is the article. I don't know if you, but this is the article, and this is the story. In a recent, and actually you can get this in the neoliberal.com and ronaldocmckenzie.com. But in a recent report by the New York Times, the U.S. national debt soared to unprecedented heights, surpassing $33 trillion for the first time. This staggering figure has prompted concerns about the country's fiscal trajectory, especially as Washington grapples with the imminent threat of a government shutdown amid debates over federal spending. What's going on? Why are you laughing? No, why are you laughing? No, really, I'm being serious. Why are you laughing?
Your structure and your whole demeanor changed. You just said a word. I felt your expression.
You felt my expression.
And
I couldn't help it. I heard you chuckle, and I had.
There was nothing but good in your energy. I cannot hold it in.
But anyways, let me continue with. This is a very serious podcast episode. A very serious editorial, a very serious presentation here. We're talking about the U.S. national debt vis-a-vis the U.S. national wealth and growth. But let me begin. Let me begin again. Let me start again. U.S. national debt exceeds $33 trillion, while national wealth surged by hundreds of trillions. A more nuanced perspective emerges when juxtaposing debt with wealth. In a recent report by the New York Times, the U.S. national debt soared to unprecedented heights, surpassing $33 trillion for the first time. This staggering figure has prompted concerns about the country's fiscal trajectory, especially as Washington grapples with the imminent threat of a government shutdown amid debates over federal spending. However, a more nuanced perspective emerges when juxtaposing this debt milestone with the remarkable growth in the nation's wealth. Over the past decade, the country's national wealth has experienced an astounding surge, catapulting from $69 trillion to an impressive $153 trillion between 2012 and 2021. Even after meticulously controlling for inflation and economic growth, This represents a remarkable 220% increase, as detailed in a report by the St. Louis Federal Reserve. Now, this substantial growth in wealth, when considered alongside the escalating national debt, demands a recalibration of our understanding. Alan Rappaport's article in the New York Times emphasizes the stark reality of the U.S. fiscal landscape, prompting a critical reassessment of our economic narrative. The debt, when viewed through the prism of quadrupling wealth and robust economic growth, does not necessarily indicate a perilous fiscal trajectory, as they are implying. Indeed, the prevailing economic strength and burgeoning wealth underscore the capacity of the nation to manage a high debt load. The age-old dichotomy between a robust economy and a burdensome national debt is brought to the forefront, challenging conventional wisdom and emphasizing the importance of proper context. Now, former Ambassador Nikki Haley's recent remarks inject a dose of pragmatism into the economic discourse, one could say. Many Americans, she notes, believe in the economic prowess of leaders like Trump, who despite growing the national deficit, are perceived as champions of economic stability. However, for the average American, economic guarantees often take precedence over other considerations, even as national debt mounts. Example, Nikki Haley indicated earlier today, or in an interview, I think it was on ABC, that many Americans are supporting Donald Trump because of what he provides, or what he can provide for them, bread and butter politics in a sense. During COVID, he was quick to write a check. He was quick to break the law to write a check. Okay, but today we see hundreds of millions of dollars being shipped overseas. The Democrats and Biden want to send billions of dollars overseas while Americans are suffering. And it seems as if there's no talk of how they plan to help struggling Americans, only to mop up liquidity. Yes, increase interest rates, making it okay. Haley's observation, however, points to a broader truth. So I'm here debunking Haley, saying that, Americans couldn't care less with some social justice when their pockets are emptying out and they're bottoming out. What is important is the dollar. It's almost okay. And if they believe that Donald Trump has the ability to help them to make money, which they think he did during COVID, then they will. Of course they're going to want to vote for him, irrespective of what he did. Nevertheless, Haley's observations point to a broader truth. Americans are inherently spenders, and economic well-being holds significant sway over political choices. Amidst concerns about debt, questions arise about the allocation of substantial funds overseas. This apparent contradiction prompts contemplation. Are the economic interests of Americans truly prioritized during times of high national debt? Now, when we put these reports into the context of unemployment, the realities of unemployment and inflation figures, scrutinizing the reported unemployment figures reveals a stark disparity from the ground realities faced by many. The exclusion of 1099 workers, entrepreneurs, and those navigating the gig economy distorts the true employment landscape. Business closures, foreclosures, house foreclosures, and the housing foreclosures, and the economic fallout from the pandemic paints a bleak picture that is not adequately captured by the traditional metrics. I said to you earlier, I was sharing a story earlier before we did the retake, that where we did our first book signing, which was done at Germantown Espresso Bar. I know the owners very well. I know the owners very well. We follow each other on social media. And I did a book signing there, but now they don't have that. They don't have the Germantown Espresso Bar anymore. Some young people got funding from through the stimulus and started and several people young professionals started businesses, and we got a lot of 1099 workers who today they're out of a job. The unemployment figures don't pick them up. Okay. The Times report The Times report, however, highlights the pushback against efforts to raise revenue and cut spending, sounding an alarm among budget watchdog groups. Michael A. Peterson of the Peter G. Peterson Foundation emphasizes the compound fiscal cycle's potential damage, projecting over $10 trillion in interest costs over the next decade. Now, as Republicans and Democrats in the House and Senate remain divided on strategies to avert a government shutdown, the blame game intensifies. Republicans advocate for spending cuts, holding the belief that out-of-control spending is the root cause of the nation's fiscal woes. Meanwhile, the White House points fingers at Republicans, attributing the debt increase over the last 2 decades to tax cuts favoring the wealthy and big corporations. The Treasury Department report on a $1.5 trillion deficit for the first 11 months of the fiscal year underscores the urgency of finding common ground. Treasury Secretary Janet L. Yellen, in a CNBC interview, expresses comfort with the current fiscal course, but stresses the importance of mindful future spending, emphasizing proposed measure to reduce deficits while investing in the economy. Now, wealth to GDP ratio and economic shifts. You have a point you wanted to make? Now, let's turn our attention to wealth to GDP ratio and economic shifts. While the national debt takes center stage in discussions, the Economic Research Council sheds light on the critical context that often goes unnoticed, analyzing U.S. wealth data from the financial accounts of the United States. The report reveals a significant shift in the wealth to GDP ratio over the past 2 decades. So while we talk about national debt surging past the third, extending beyond, surpassing $33 trillion, we have to remember that also there's also wealth to GDP. Our wealth has surpassed $153 trillion. And our growth, which was projected to be dismal based on the World Economic Output Report, and we published an article recently about that, and JP Morgan Chase talking about the looming recession. What we know of is that GDP, the US has defied the outlook, and we are growing beyond, and our GDP over the last quarter was beyond 4%. Now, traditionally, just so you know, the financial account of the United States, the report reveals a significant shift in wealth to GDP ratio over the past 2 decades. Traditionally, stable between 1950 and 1995, the wealth to GDP ratio witnessed a cyclical pattern from the mid-1990s onward. Corporate business and household assets drove 2 noticeable cycles, with the past decade experiencing an unprecedented surge. This rise, predominantly propelled by the value increase in corporate business and residential housing, presents a new economic landscape. Now, what are the factors driving wealth growth? Now, exploring possible explanations for this rapid rise, the essay that we from the essay as submitted by Miss Shien, Yi Shien in Economic Research, the essay considers factors such as increased market power of firms and the expectations of fast rising future profitability. It didn't really delve into AI technology, but we've already did a show, and we've written several articles talking about AI technology and what it means for the future of our world. And in our new book, NeoLiberal Globalization, we will delve into it. But the rise in corporate business wealth is viewed not merely as a reflection of current GDP, but as an anticipation of future growth, supported by the high price-to-earnings ratios of U.S. technology companies. Now, moreover, the report points out that GDP may underestimate the current economic landscape due to the inadequacy of accounting for certain services provided by technology companies, which are essentially free but immensely valuable to consumers. Now, there are some concerns and implications. Concerns loom over the recent surge in the wealth to GDP ratio. Especially, one of the concerns is that, of course, the wealth is concentrated among very few, because poverty has doubled amongst children. We published an article highlighting that based on the U.S. Census report, post-COVID, child poverty has doubled since 2020. We talked about that income inequality has skyrocketed, coupled with the rise in crime and violence and theft. Yes. So concerns loom over the recent surge. Historical precedent, and there's another concern. In addition to that, is that historical precedents show that similar increases triggered recessions in 2001 and 2008. What we are seeing now is what we saw prior to the recession of 2001 and 2008. The current surge, larger and more rapid though than ever before, raises questions about the sustainability of this trajectory and the potential risk of another asset bubble. So as economic complexities intertwine with political choices and fiscal responsibility, the broader implications for the US economy remain uncertain, and the narrative surrounding the national debt must evolve beyond sensationalism, embracing a more nuanced understanding of economic forces and their consequences. Okay, say for example, we have high wealth, so therefore, okay, I said earlier, give Americans the money. In conclusion, let me just conclude. The juxtaposition of the national debt and wealth growth paints a complex picture of the U.S. economy. While concerns about fiscal responsibility and the potential fiscal crisis persist, the interplay between economic strength, wealth accumulation, and political choices highlights the need for a holistic and informed discourse. The Economic Research Council's detailed analysis of the wealth to GDP ratio provides a crucial backdrop, urging policymakers and the public to consider the broader context in navigating the economic future of the United States. In Neoliberalism, my book Neoliberalism Globalization, Income Inequality, Poverty and Resistance, the issue of income inequality as measured by the Gini coefficient provides even greater analysis and context, and I invite you to check my book out, available at Barnes & Noble, Walmart, Target, Amazon, so on and so forth, in all platforms. Now, over the last decade, income inequality has also been surging, as I said earlier. And we noticed that the Gini coefficient for post-industrial countries, as against the Caribbean and other, we noted the Gini coefficient for post-industrial countries as against the Caribbean and other global South countries in that book, Neoliberalism. And so I'm at a place to be able to talk about that. But in the second edition of Neoliberalism, entitled Neoliberal Globalization Reconsidered, Neo-Capitalism and the Death of Nations, which is about to come out. I'm about to release that book. We go even further, exploring the rise in income inequality as child poverty and crime and violence rises, while rich countries continue to get richer while limiting spending and mopping up liquidity, affecting the most vulnerable with the application of several incremental interest rate hikes. Now, of course, we'll continue to follow this story. And please get a copy of my book, Neoliberal Globalization Reconsidered, where we delve into some of these policies on a more broader macroscopic scale. The reference list for this particular article and reading comes to us from my book, Neoliberalism, Globalization, Income Inequality, Poverty and Resistance, published by Palmetto and the Neoliberal in 2021. Alan Rappaport's article entitled U.S. National Debt Tops $33 trillion for First Time in the New York Times, and Yi Li Chien and Ashley Stewart's article entitled The Recent Rise of U.S. National Wealth in the St. Louis Fed at stlouisfed.org. Of course, this particular article and this particular presentation is available in the Neoliberal Post at ReinaldoCMcKenzie.com and the Neoliberal Journals at theneoliberal.com. The narrative surrounding the national debt must, however, evolve beyond sensationalism, embracing a more nuanced understanding of economic forces and their consequences, or might I say, their broader consequences. So, in conclusion, I will add a very important point as it relates to income inequality and relative deprivation. But in conclusion, the juxtaposition of the national debt and wealth growth paints a complex picture of the U.S. economy. While concerns about fiscal responsibility and the potential fiscal crisis persist, the interplay between economic strength and wealth accumulation and political choices highlights the need for a holistic and informed discourse. The Economic Research Council's detailed analysis of the wealth to GDP ratio provides a crucial backdrop, urging policymakers and the public to consider the broader context in navigating the economic future of the United States. In my book, Neoliberalism, the issue in my first book, Neoliberalism, Globalization, Income Inequality, Poverty and Resistance, Neoliberalism Book 1, the issue of income inequality as measured by the Gini coefficient provides even greater analysis and context. You see, over the last decade, income inequality has also been surging. And we noted that the Gini coefficient for post-industrial countries, as against the Caribbean and other global south places, in the second edition of Neoliberalism, Neoliberal Globalization, Reconsidered, New Capitalism and Death of Nations, we go even further exploring the rise in income inequality as against child poverty and crime and violence, while richer countries continue to get richer, while limiting spending and mopping up liquidity with the application of several incremental interest rate hikes. So all of this has to be placed into perspective. Let me say this again. While concerns about fiscal responsibility and the potential fiscal crisis persists, the interplay between economic strength, wealth accumulation, because amidst all of this, people are getting rich, while there are many people who are getting poorer. Many people are getting poorer, resulting in the kind of rising criminality we see in communities across the U.S. In neoliberalism, the issue of income inequality as measured by the Gini coefficient provides even greater analysis and context. Get your copy of my book, actually. Neoliberalism, Globalization, Income Inequality, Poverty and Resistance, which is available here at the Neoliberal. You can go to the neoliberal.com/shop, or you can message us via Twitter, Ronaldo McKenzie, or the Neoliberal Co., or you can go to our Facebook page, the Neoliberal Bookstore, or Ronaldo McKenzie, or the Neoliberal. Of course, visit us at the neoliberal.com/the Neoliberal Bookstore, or the neoliberal.com/shop. It's also available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, and Target. And my second book is about to be published, Neoliberal Globalization Reconsidered, New Capitalism and the Death of Nations, and we pick up some of the ideas that we have discussed briefly in this particular editorial, which is available in the Neoliberal Post at ronaldocmckenzie.com and the Neoliberal Journals at theneoliberal.com. Please subscribe to us on any stream and support us and let us know how we can improve the show. Donate to us by going to anchor.fm/theneoliberal/support. This is the NeoLiberal Round podcast, produced by the NeoLiberal Corporation, serving the world today to solve tomorrow's challenges, and making popular what was the monopoly. All good.